In the luxurious mansion, a girl wept before a plate of leftovers, humiliated by her stepmother's cruelty. Her whispered plea, "Don't make me eat this," echoed like a cry of despair. But at that moment, the millionaire entered and witnessed the truth he had never seen before. What he did next changed his daughter's fate forever and exposed his wife's deception. The mansion rose imposingly in the most exclusive neighborhood of New York City, surrounded by impeccable gardens and high walls that concealed more than they protected. Along the Italian marble corridors, French crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceilings, reflecting an opulence that impressed any visitor. But there was something about that place that didn't quite match all that splendor, something that only observant eyes would perceive in the shadows of those illuminated halls. Helena was only 9 years old, and her brown eyes carried a sadness too profound for a child of that age. Her light brown hair fell in soft waves over her slender shoulders, and her fair skin seemed even paler in recent months. She walked through the corridors with silent steps, as if fearing to make noise, as if her very existence were an inconvenience that needed to be minimized. That Thursday afternoon, Helena was sitting in the house's library, pretending to read a fairy tale book she already knew by heart. In truth, she just wanted to be away from the watchful eyes of Beatrice, the woman her father had brought home 2 years after that terrible day when her mother had to leave. Helena still remembered the soft jasmine perfume her mother wore, the sweet voice that comforted her on stormy nights, the warm hugs that made any problem seem small. Beatrice was completely different. Tall blonde with delicate features that concealed a calculating coldness, she had entered Robert Miller's life like a blast of icy wind. Robert, a successful businessman in the import-export industry, had built an empire from scratch. At 45, he was a handsome man, with dark hair already touched by a few grey strands, an athletic physique maintained by rigorous morning workouts, and an unwavering discipline he applied to both business and personal life. When he met Beatrice at a corporate event, Robert was vulnerable. The absence of Mariana, his first wife, had left a void he tried to fill with work. Beatrice was kind, attentive, said the right words at the right times. She promised to take care of Helena as if she were her own daughter, promised to bring joy back to that silent house. Robert, blinded by loneliness and the need to believe he could rebuild his family, accepted every promise as truth. The wedding was discreet, elegant, celebrated in the mansion's own garden. Helena, dressed in a light pink dress chosen by Beatrice, held the bouquet of flowers with trembling hands. She tried to smile for the photos, tried to be the well-behaved daughter everyone expected her to be, but something in her eyes already betrayed the fear that was beginning to grow within her. In the first few months, Beatrice maintained the facade. In Robert's presence, she was sweet to Helena, offered her fresh juices, asked about school, carefully styled her hair. But when Robert traveled, which happened frequently due to his business extending across the country, the true Beatrice emerged from the shadows like a nightmare. The first cruelties were subtle. A plate of food served cold while everyone else ate hot. A harsh word disguised as advice. A look of contempt that made Helena feel small and invisible. With time, the humiliations became bolder, more painful. Beatrice was meticulous in her cruelty, always careful not to leave visible marks, always cunning in her justifications should anyone question her. Helena had learned not to complain. The few times she tried to tell her father about the treatment she received, Beatrice was always there, ready with a perfectly constructed explanation. She would say Helena was being dramatic, that it was just necessary discipline, that the girl was testing limits as any child would with a new maternal figure. Robert, always busy, always too trusting, accepted the explanations without questioning deeply. The library was Helena's refuge. Among the mahogany shelves filled with old and new books, she found a little of the peace her life had lost. There she could imagine herself in other places, in other lives where cruel stepmothers did not exist, and fathers were always present. She especially loved the books that had belonged to her mother, those with notes in the margins, delicate underlines, small flowers drawn next to favorite passages. The sound of high heels echoed through the marble corridor, approaching the library. Helena felt her heart race. She recognized that sound, the precise and impatient rhythm of Beatrice's footsteps. Quickly the girl straightened in the armchair, pretending to be absorbed in her reading. The door opened without ceremony. Beatrice entered in an impeccable white dress that contrasted with the harshness of her icy blue eyes. She watched Helena for a long moment, like a predator assessing its prey. "Your father called. He'll be in Houston for another week." "Problems with suppliers," Beatrice said, and a thin smile appeared on her lips. "That means we'll have plenty of time together, you and I." Helena swallowed hard, her hands clutching the book tightly. She didn't respond, knowing that any word could be used against her. "Get up," Beatrice ordered. "We need to talk about your behavior." "But I didn't do anything." Helena's voice came out low, almost a whisper. "Exactly," Beatrice retorted, crossing her arms. "You do nothing. You don't help around the house. You don't make an effort to be grateful for everything you have. Do you know how many children would love to live in a house like this?" "I do help," Helena defended herself timidly. "I tidy my room, I do my schoolwork." Beatrice took a step forward, her presence dominating the space. "Your mother spoiled you too much, made you a weak child without discipline. But that will change. While your father is away, you will learn what real work is." Helena felt tears burn her eyes but refused to let them fall. Crying in front of Beatrice only made her feel more powerful. "Go to the kitchen. Maria prepared dinner, but you'll eat after everyone else finishes. And you'll wash all the dishes yourself. No help from the maids," Beatrice instructed. "But I have homework to do," Helena protested weakly. "You should have thought of that before wasting time here with useless books." Beatrice turned to leave, but stopped at the door. "Oh, and Helena, if you try to complain to your father when he gets back, I'll have to tell him about all the lies you've been inventing about me, about how disrespectful and ungrateful you've been. He'll be very disappointed." With that, Beatrice left, leaving Helena alone in the library that suddenly seemed less a refuge and more a gilded cage. The girl looked out the window, watching the sun begin to set behind the New York City buildings. The sky was tinged with orange and pink, beautiful colors that contrasted with the darkness she felt growing inside her. Helena closed the book carefully and placed it back on the shelf. Her fingers brushed over the spines of the other books, stopping at a brown leather-bound diary. It was her mother's diary, hidden among the larger volumes. She had discovered it months ago and read it in secret whenever she needed to feel close to Mariana. At that moment, Helena took the diary from the shelf and opened it to a marked page. Her mother's delicate handwriting read, "True strength is not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. Always remember, my Helena, you are stronger than you imagine." The girl held the diary against her chest, closing her eyes tightly. She needed that strength now more than ever. She needed to find a way to survive the situation until her father finally saw the truth. Because Helena knew, somewhere deep in her heart, that eventually Beatrice's mask would fall. She just needed to hold on until then. With the diary hidden under her arm, Helena walked towards the kitchen, preparing for another night of silent humiliations. The mansion's corridors seemed longer than usual, the shadows darker, the crystal chandeliers reflecting a light that suddenly seemed cold and distant. In the kitchen, Maria, the cook who had worked in the house since before Helena was born, looked at the girl with evident concern in her brown eyes. She had seen a lot in those last 2 years, had witnessed Helena's transformation from a cheerful child into a frightened shadow. But Maria was also afraid of Beatrice, afraid of losing her job, afraid of the consequences of speaking the truth. "Leave the dishes for me later, child," Maria whispered when Beatrice wasn't around. But Helena shook her head. "No, Maria, she'll know, and it will be worse for both of us." The cook sighed deeply, her wrinkled hand gently touching Helena's shoulder before leaving the kitchen. She needed to leave before Beatrice suspected any complicity. Helena was left alone in the enormous kitchen, surrounded by modern appliances and granite countertops that gleamed under the LED lights. The pile of dishes was considerable, the result of an elaborate dinner that had been served to Beatrice and some guests she had received that afternoon. While washing the dishes, Helena let her mind wander. She thought of her father, so distant even when he was present. She thought of her mother, whose memory was beginning to blur with the passage of time, like an old photograph losing its colors. She thought of how life could have been different, how it should have been different. Outside, night had fully fallen over New York City. The city lights twinkled in the distance, millions of lives unfolding simultaneously, each with its own stories, its own pains and joys. Helena wondered how many other girls were at that moment feeling as alone as she was, as invisible in their own homes. But what Helena didn't know, as she dried the last plate with tired hands, was that changes were coming, that sometimes life has a peculiar way of revealing hidden truths, of bringing to light what has been kept in the shadows for too long, and that soon, very soon, the foundations of that mansion of lies would begin to tremble. The following days dragged on like an eternity for Helena. With Robert still in Houston resolving supplier issues, Beatrice had free rein to turn the girl's life into a systematic nightmare. The housemaids witnessed everything in silence, caught between loyalty to a defenseless child and the fear of losing their jobs. That Friday morning, Helena came downstairs for breakfast with eyes swollen from sleep. She had spent the night awake, listening to the nocturnal noises of the house and fearing that Beatrice would appear in her room with some new, humiliating task. The dining room table was elegantly set, as always. White linen tablecloth, fine porcelain, fresh flowers in the center. Beatrice was already seated, flipping through a home decor magazine while sipping her coffee. She didn't even look up when Helena entered. "Sit down," she ordered dryly. Helena obeyed, carefully pulling out her chair so as not to make a sound. Carla, the maid responsible for serving meals, brought a tray with fresh bread, sliced fruit, natural juices, and a variety of cheeses and cold cuts. But when she went to place Helena's plate, Beatrice raised her hand. "No, she won't eat that today." Carla froze, the plate suspended in the air. "But Mrs. Beatrice, the girl needs to eat before going to school." "I decide what she needs," Beatrice retorted coldly. "Helena has been very wasteful lately. Yesterday I threw away an entire plate of food she barely touched. So today she will learn the value of what we have." Beatrice gestured to Carla, who reluctantly went to the kitchen and returned with a different plate. On it were cold leftovers, scraps that had been taken from plates the night before, dried rice, hardened pieces of meat, wilted vegetables. It was food that would normally be discarded or, at best, given to the neighborhood dogs. Helena felt her stomach churn. She looked at Beatrice, then at Carla, who averted her eyes in shame. Tears began to form, but Helena tried to hold them back. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I promise not to waste food anymore. Please don't make me eat this." Beatrice finally looked at her, and there was something cruel in her blue eyes. "You eat it or you go without food all day. Your choice." Helena looked at the plate again. The food had a sour smell, and some parts already showed signs of spoilage. She knew that if she ate it, she would probably get sick. But she also knew that if she refused, Beatrice would find even worse ways to punish her. With trembling hands, Helena picked up the fork. But before she could bring anything to her mouth, Carla interfered. "Mrs. Beatrice, with all due respect, this food is not fit for consumption. The girl could get sick." Beatrice turned to the maid with an icy stare. "Carla, are you questioning my decisions in my own home?" "No, madam, but the girl's health. If you are not satisfied with how I run this house, feel free to look for another job." The threat was clear in Beatrice's voice. Carla recoiled, her cheeks red with humiliation and suppressed anger. She cast an apologetic glance at Helena before returning to the kitchen. The girl was left alone with her stepmother, that horrible plate between them as a symbol of all the cruelty that had settled in that house. But Helena did not eat. Something inside her, perhaps the memory of her mother's strength, perhaps just the basic instinct of survival, made her push the plate away. "I won't eat this," she said, and her own voice sounded strangely firm to her ears. Beatrice raised an eyebrow, surprised for the first time. "So you chose to starve, very well. We'll see how long this rebellion lasts." Helena got up from the table and went to her room to get her school supplies. She was hungry. Her last decent meal had been the previous day at school lunch, but she preferred hunger to that humiliation. As she put her notebooks in her backpack, she took the plate of spoiled food that Beatrice had insisted on, carefully wrapped it in paper napkins, and hid it at the bottom of her drawer. She didn't know exactly why she was doing it. She just felt she might need that evidence someday. At school, Helena could barely concentrate on her classes. Her teacher, Juliana Anderson, a woman in her 30s with observant eyes, noticed that the girl was paler and quieter than usual. "Helena, are you all right?" she asked during recess, when the other children were running around the playground. "Yes, teacher," Helena lied, forcing a weak smile. But Juliana was not convinced. "You didn't touch your snack. Aren't you hungry?" "I'm not very hungry today." The teacher studied the girl's face for a long moment. She had seen troubling changes in Helena over the past few months. The girl who used to actively participate in class, who smiled and played with her classmates, had become a silent shadow, always withdrawn, always frightened. "If you need to talk about anything, I'm here," Juliana said gently, placing a hand on Helena's shoulder. The girl just nodded, fearing that if she said anything, she would start crying and wouldn't be able to stop. When she returned home that afternoon, Helena found Beatrice in the living room, talking on the phone with one of her friends. She was laughing, her melodious voice filling the room. It was the voice she used for the outside world, the mask of a charming and caring woman that she wore to perfection. Seeing Helena enter, Beatrice made a shushing gesture with her finger to her lips and continued the conversation. "Yes, of course, she's a lovely girl. We're adapting very well. Robert is so happy to have a complete family again." Helena went up to her room in silence, every word from Beatrice echoing in her mind like poisonous lies. How could that woman be so different, so perfectly divided between her public persona and the cruel creature hiding behind closed doors? That night, Helena went to bed hungry again. Beatrice had instructed Carla not to give the girl food, saying it was part of a lesson on discipline. Maria, the cook, had smuggled a piece of bread and a fruit to Helena, leaving them hidden under a towel in the bathroom the girl used. It was a small gesture of kindness amidst so much cruelty. Helena ate the bread slowly, savoring every crumb as if it were a feast. She saved the apple for the next day, hiding it along with the plate of spoiled food she had brought from breakfast. Her drawer was becoming an archive of evidence, though she still didn't know exactly what she would do with it. As she lay in bed, looking at the high ceiling of her room, Helena thought of her father. Robert called every day, but the conversations were always brief. He asked about school, about how she was getting along with Beatrice, but always seemed rushed, always had another meeting, another commitment. And Beatrice was always nearby during the calls, her watchful gaze ensuring Helena didn't say anything inappropriate. Thousands of miles away in Houston, Robert Miller was sitting in his hotel suite, a pile of contracts on the table in front of him. He was exhausted. Negotiations with suppliers were proving more complicated than expected. But there was something else, a persistent unease he couldn't identify. In recent calls with Helena, he had noticed something in her voice, a hesitation that wasn't there before. He picked up his cell phone and dialed home again, even though he had already called earlier. Beatrice answered on the second ring. "Hi, love, everything all right? Did you miss me?" "Yes, I want to talk to Helena. She's already asleep, Robert. It's almost 9 o'clock. But he had heard something, a background noise that didn't fit a silent house at night. "Are you sure she's asleep? I can just say good night quickly." There was a pause. "Robert, are you okay? You sound strange. I just want to talk to my daughter." Beatrice sighed, a sound of ill-disguised irritation. "All right, I'll get her." Helena was woken by a knock at the door. Beatrice entered, holding out the phone with a clear warning expression on her face. "Your father wants to talk to you. Remember what we discussed about being grateful." Helena took the phone with trembling hands. "Hi, Dad. Hi, my flower." "Sorry to wake you. I just wanted to hear your voice." "It's okay, Dad. How was school today?" "It was good. Mrs. Anderson gave a math test. I think I did well." "That's great. And how is Beatrice? Is she taking good care of you?" Helena looked at Beatrice, who was standing beside the bed, arms crossed, icy blue eyes fixed on her like lasers. "She is," Helena replied, her voice sounding hollow even to her own ears. "Are you sure? You sound different." "I'm just sleepy, Dad." Robert wanted to believe that, wanted to believe he was imagining things. But something in his paternal instinct was sounding alarms. "All right. I love you, Helena. I'll be back soon. I love you too, Dad." When the call ended, Beatrice took the phone back. "Very good. You are a good girl. Now sleep. And remember, if you try to cause trouble, the consequences will be worse." After Beatrice left, Helena lay in the dark for hours. She thought about screaming out the window, about running into the street, about doing anything to escape that nightmare. But she knew it was useless. Beatrice had built her prison so meticulously that there were no apparent exits. What Helena didn't know was that, at that very moment, thousands of miles away, her father was sitting on the edge of his hotel bed, unable to sleep. Robert held the phone, replaying the conversation with Helena, every word, every pause, every inflection of voice. And for the first time since he had married Beatrice, a seed of doubt began to sprout in his mind. Something was wrong, deeply wrong, and Robert Miller had not built an empire by ignoring his instincts. He picked up the phone again and called his secretary. "Clarice, cancel all my meetings for tomorrow. I'm flying back to New York City on the first flight in the morning. But Mr. Miller, the negotiations with the suppliers, they can wait. My daughter cannot." The flight from Houston to New York City seemed endless. Robert was sitting in first class, but he couldn't enjoy any of the comforts offered. His mind was completely focused on Helena, on the recent conversations that had sounded so strange, on the silences that said more than words. He remembered Mariana, how she used to say he was too absent, that he needed to be more present in Helena's life. At the time, Robert had defended himself, arguing that he worked so hard precisely to give his family everything they needed. But now, looking out the plane window at the white clouds below, he wondered if Mariana hadn't been right. When the plane landed at JFK Airport at 8 in the morning, Robert didn't notify anyone at home. He took a taxi directly from the airport, his carry-on bag being his only luggage. Throughout the journey to the Upper East Side, he mentally rehearsed what he would say to Beatrice, how he would approach the situation without appearing to accuse his wife of something terrible without proof. It was almost 10 o'clock when the taxi stopped in front of the mansion gates. Robert used his remote control to open the gate and asked the driver to drop him off right there, preferring to walk in. He wanted to observe the house, to have a moment to prepare himself before entering. The garden was impeccable as always, the flowers well tended, the lawn freshly mowed. Everything seemed perfectly normal, and Robert began to feel foolish for having cancelled important meetings and rushed home because of a feeling. Maybe he was just tired, maybe business stress. But then he heard something that chilled him to the bone. It was Beatrice's voice coming from somewhere inside the house, and she was screaming. Robert quickened his pace, entering through the front door, which was unlocked. The sound came from the direction of the kitchen. "You are a spoiled and ungrateful child." Beatrice's voice echoed through the corridors. "After everything your father does for you, after I opened my heart to accept you into my life, is this how you treat me?" Robert walked silently down the marble corridor, his heart pounding in his chest. When he reached the entrance to the kitchen, the scene he saw before his eyes left him paralyzed. Helena was cornered against one of the countertops, her face red from crying, her eyes wide with fear. Before her, Beatrice held a plate of visibly spoiled food, practically forcing the girl to eat it. "You will eat this, and you will learn to be grateful," Beatrice continued, unaware of Robert's presence. "Do you think you're too good to eat what I serve? I'll teach you humility." "What is going on here?" Robert's voice cut through the air like a whip. Beatrice turned abruptly, and for a fraction of a second, Robert saw an expression of pure hatred on her face before she quickly replaced it with a mask of surprise and relief. "Robert!" "You're back." "Thank goodness." She quickly dropped the plate and went towards her husband. "Helena has been impossible. She refused to eat the breakfast I so carefully prepared and has been disrespectful to all the maids. I was just trying to make her understand." Robert looked over Beatrice's shoulder at Helena. The girl was trembling, tears silently streaming down her cheeks, but she said nothing. Her eyes met her father's, and in them there was so much fear, so much pain, that Robert felt as if someone had squeezed his heart tightly. "Helena, is what Beatrice is saying true?" The girl opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked at Beatrice, who had a warning expression on her face, then looked back at her father. Robert saw the conflict in her eyes, saw the moment she made the decision to remain silent to protect herself. "I won't ask again," Robert said, but this time his voice was gentler. "Helena, I need you to be honest with me." It was then that Maria entered the kitchen, coming from the pantry. She stopped when she saw Robert, surprised by his unexpected presence. The cook looked at Helena, at Beatrice, then at Robert, and something in her expression told the businessman that much more was happening in that house than he imagined. "Maria, you've been here for many years. I want you to tell me what's going on, and I want the truth." The cook hesitated. She looked at Beatrice, whose face had transformed into a mask of contained anger. "Mr. Robert, I don't know if you will not lose your job for telling me the truth. But I need to know what's happening to my daughter." Maria took a deep breath. She had kept that secret for months, witnessing Beatrice's cruelty in silence, always afraid to interfere and make things worse for Helena. But now, with Robert finally there, finally asking the right questions, she could no longer remain silent. "Sir, the girl is not being treated well. Mrs. Beatrice, Maria paused, choosing her words carefully. "She treats little Helena very harshly when you are not here. That food the girl was supposed to eat was in the trash yesterday. Mrs. Beatrice took it from there and wanted to force the child to eat it." Beatrice stepped forward, her voice rising. "That's an absurd lie. Robert, are you going to believe a maid instead of your wife?" But Robert wasn't looking at Beatrice. He was looking at Helena, and finally he was truly seeing his daughter. He saw the excessive paleness, the sunken eyes of someone who hadn't slept properly, the way she hunched her shoulders as if she wanted to disappear. How had he not noticed before? How had he been so blind? "Helena, come here." He extended his arms. The girl hesitated for a second, then ran to her father, throwing herself into his arms and finally letting the tears fall freely. She sobbed against Robert's chest, years of pain and fear finally finding an outlet. Robert hugged his daughter tightly, one hand caressing her hair, the other holding her firmly as if to protect her from everything in the world. He looked at Beatrice over Helena's head, and for the first time since he had met her, he saw her clearly. "How long?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. "How long has this been going on?" Beatrice tried to maintain her composure. "Robert, you're being ridiculous. I'm trying to educate your daughter, to give her the discipline she needs." "Discipline?" Robert's voice rose. "Forcing a child to eat spoiled food is discipline? You don't understand how manipulative she is. She's trying to separate us, she always has. She never accepted me as her new mother. Because you were never a mother to her." Robert felt the anger rising within him, an anger he rarely allowed to surface. I was a blind fool for not seeing this before. Robert carried Helena in his arms, even though she was 9 years old and big for it. He took her out of the kitchen, up the stairs towards her room. Beatrice followed them, trying to continue her defense, but Robert ignored her completely. In Helena's room, Robert sat on the bed with his daughter in his lap. "Tell me everything, from the beginning. And don't be afraid. I promise nothing bad will happen to you." And then, for the first time in 2 years, Helena told her story. She started slowly with fear, but as the words flowed, she found her voice. She told about the cold plates while everyone else ate hot, about the clothes Beatrice tore and blamed Helena for destroying, about the scribbled notebooks to make it seem like she wasn't paying attention in class, about the nights locked in her room without dinner, about the constant humiliations that happened whenever Robert traveled. Beatrice was standing in the doorway of the room, and Robert could see her trying to find explanations, trying to formulate excuses. But there were no excuses. Not for that. "There's more," Helena said timidly, getting up from her father's lap. She went to her dresser and opened the bottom drawer. From inside, she retrieved the plate wrapped in napkins that she had hidden days before, along with some pieces of dried bread and other traces of the humiliations she had suffered. Robert took the plate, looked at the moldy food, and something inside him broke. He had failed Mariana by being too absent, and now he had failed Helena by trusting the wrong person to care for her. "Get out," he said to Beatrice, his voice low but filled with contained fury. "Robert, you can't get out of this room now. I'm going to make some calls. You're going to start looking for another place to live. You can't kick me out of my own house. This is not your house. It never was. It was Mariana's, it's Helena's, and it's mine. And you will have no more power here." Beatrice stormed out, slamming the door, her face contorted in a mixture of anger and despair. Robert could hear her screaming from the hallway, but he blocked out the sound. At that moment, only Helena mattered. He hugged his daughter again, this time with tears in his own eyes. "I'm sorry, my flower. I'm sorry I didn't see, for not being here when you needed me. But I promise you this will never happen again. Never again." Helena clung to her father, feeling for the first time in 2 years that maybe, just maybe, everything could be okay again. Outside the window, the New York City sun shone brightly, and for the first time in a long time that light didn't feel cold. The days that followed were as tense as a violin string about to snap. Beatrice had not left the house as Robert ordered, arguing that she had legal rights as a wife. Robert, in turn, had immediately hired a lawyer and initiated divorce proceedings. But the process would be long, and meanwhile the three lived under the same roof in a silent war. Robert had cancelled all his trips indefinitely. No matter how many important deals were at stake, how many contracts needed his personal signature, Helena was his priority now, and he would not make the same mistake twice. He began working from his home office, from where he could observe everything that happened. Beatrice, for her part, had completely changed her strategy. Realizing that a direct approach would no longer work, she began to act like a devoted wife and a loving stepmother whenever Robert was around. She asked about Helena's day at school, offered her natural juices, even tried to help her with homework. But Helena flinched whenever Beatrice approached, and this did not go unnoticed by Robert. It was a Thursday afternoon when things took a completely unexpected turn. Helena had just returned from school and was in the living room doing her homework when the doorbell rang. Carla answered and returned with a confused expression on her face. "Mr. Miller, there's a woman at the door asking to speak to Mrs. Beatrice. She says she's her sister." Beatrice, who was upstairs, came down quickly, her face pale. "Tell her I'm busy." But Robert was curious. He didn't know Beatrice had a sister. In fact, she had always said she had no family, that she was an only child of deceased parents. "Let her in," he said, ignoring Beatrice's warning look. The woman who entered was clearly older than Beatrice, perhaps 10 years her senior. She had dark hair and a tired face, marked by wrinkles of worry. Her clothes were simple but clean, and she carried an old handbag. "Excuse me for disturbing," she began, looking nervously at Beatrice. "I'm Marcia, Beatrice's sister. I need to talk to her." Beatrice crossed her arms, her jaw tight. "Marcia, I told you not to show up here." "I know, but it's about Mom. She's in the hospital and needs money for treatment. You promised you'd help." Robert observed the interaction with growing interest. Beatrice had always said she was an only child and an orphan. Why would she lie about something like that? "Please sit down. Let's talk civilly." Marcia sat hesitantly on the sofa, while Beatrice remained standing, visibly uncomfortable. Robert also sat down, and Helena, feeling the tension in the air, discreetly stopped doing her homework to observe. "Marcia, you said you're Beatrice's sister. Can you tell me a little about your family?" The woman looked at Beatrice, confused. "Didn't she tell you? We are 3 sisters. Beatrice is the middle one. Our mother is still alive, though ill. And our father is also alive, although they've been separated for years. But Beatrice told me she was an only child, and that her parents had passed away." Marcia looked genuinely shocked. "Why would she say that?" Beatrice finally exploded. "Because you were never a real family to me. You always compared me to the 2 of you, always made me feel inferior. When I left home, I decided you were lost to me." Robert processed this information carefully. Beatrice's first big lie was being exposed, and he wondered how many others there would be. "Marcia, can you tell me what Beatrice was like when she was younger?" Her sister sighed deeply. Beatrice was always complicated. She was jealous of everyone, especially me and our younger sister, Fernanda. When Fernanda got a scholarship to a good university, Beatrice was furious. She said we were favored, that she was always left out. But it wasn't true. Our mother tried to treat all of us equally. "But you never understood me," Beatrice interrupted. "You had talent, you were beautiful, you were smart, and me. I was just the middle one, always forgotten." "You forgot yourself, Beatrice," Marcia said sadly. "You became so obsessed with proving you were better than us that you pushed away everyone who tried to get close." Robert looked at Helena, who was listening to everything with wide eyes. Suddenly, many things began to make sense. Beatrice's cruelty to Helena wasn't just gratuitous malice. It was something deeper, something rooted in her own past, in her own insecurities and frustrations. Marcia continued speaking, and the more she told, the more Robert understood who he had married. Beatrice had a history of destructive envy, of constant comparisons, of always needing to be the best, the most important. When that didn't happen naturally, she sabotaged those around her. "There was a fiancé," Marcia recounted, looking at Beatrice with sadness. "He was in love with our sister Fernanda, but Beatrice invented terrible lies about her, said that Fernanda was involved with another man. The engagement ended, and Fernanda was devastated. By the time the truth came out, Beatrice had already left town. We didn't speak to her for years. Those are lies, Beatrice protested, but her voice sounded weak. Robert got up and went to the window, watching the garden outside as he processed everything. Beatrice wasn't just cruel to Helena. There was a pattern to her behavior, a history he should have investigated before marrying her. Marcia, thank you for coming here and telling me this. I will arrange help for your mother. Please give me the hospital details. Beatrice looked at her husband, perplexed. You're going to help my family after everything they said? So I'm going to help a sick lady, no matter who she is. Unlike you, I believe in doing what is right. After Marcia left with Robert's promise that he would cover Beatrice's mother's medical expenses, the house fell silent. Beatrice went up to the room she now occupied alone, the guest room, and slammed the door. Helena was sitting next to her father on the sofa, her small hand holding his. Daddy, was she always like this? It seems so, my flower, but that doesn't justify what she did to you. Nothing justifies it. That night, Robert received a call from his lawyer. Mr. Miller, I need to inform you that the divorce process could be complicated. Mrs. Beatrice is claiming she deserves a significant portion of your assets, as she abandoned her career to dedicate herself to the family. What career? Robert laughed bitterly. She never worked a day since we got married. She's saying she was a manager at a company and gave it all up for you. Another lie. Can your investigator get me proof of her professional history? I'm already arranging it, sir. Robert hung up the phone and went to check on Helena. The girl was lying in bed but not sleeping. He sat beside her. I can't sleep, Daddy. I keep thinking she's still here in the house. I know, my flower, but I promise I won't let her get near you. And soon she'll be gone for good. Helena sat up in bed, hugging her father. Daddy, can I ask you something? Of course, anything. Why did you marry her? Robert sighed deeply. That was a question he was asking himself constantly. I was lonely and sad after your mother left. Beatrice appeared at the right time, said the right things. I wanted to believe we could be a family again. But I was wrong. No one can replace your mother, and I shouldn't have tried. Do you miss Mom? Every day. And I know you do too. Helena nodded, tears streaming down her face. Sometimes I forget what her face looked like. I'm afraid I'll forget completely. Robert got up and went to Helena's closet. From the back, he took out a box he had kept for years. Inside were photos of Mariana, letters she had written, small objects that belonged to her. Let's keep these memories together, so you never forget how special your mother was. Father and daughter spent hours looking at photos, reminiscing about stories, laughing at happy memories and crying over the loss. It was a healing process that should have started a long time ago, but which Beatrice had prevented with her toxic presence. Meanwhile, in the guest room, Beatrice was on the phone with someone. Her voice was low but full of venom. I need you to help me. Yes, he found out everything. No, I'm not leaving without taking what's rightfully mine. I worked hard to be in this position. I'm not losing everything now. On the other end of the line, a male voice responded, but the words were inaudible. Beatrice smiled, a cold and calculating smile. Great. Then let's go with Plan B. If he thinks he can just discard me, he'll find out he completely underestimated who he's dealing with. Downstairs, Robert felt a chill run up his spine. Something told him the battle was just beginning. The following week brought a twist no one expected. Robert was in his home office reviewing contracts when he received a call from an unknown number. Normally he wouldn't answer, but something made him take the call. Mr. Miller. A female voice on the other end sounded nervous. Yes, who is this? My name is Patricia Smith. I was your wife Beatrice's assistant a few years ago before you got married. Robert sat up straighter in his chair. Go on. I saw in the society papers that you were getting a divorce. I know it's not my business, but there's something you should know. Something I've been keeping for years for fear of the consequences. What would that be? Patricia took a deep breath on the other end of the line. The meeting between the two of you. At the corporate event 3 years ago. It wasn't accidental. Beatrice planned everything. She made me investigate you for weeks. We found out about your wife's passing, about your daughter, about your business. Beatrice studied every detail of your life before approaching you. Robert felt his stomach churn. Are you saying it was all premeditated? Not just the initial meeting, everything. The conversations about shared interests, the places she claimed to like, even the music she pretended to appreciate. Everything was calculated to make you believe she was the perfect woman for you. Why? Why would she do that? For the money and the status, Mr. Miller. Beatrice was always obsessed with being part of high society. She saw marriage as a way to achieve that. And I'm sorry to say, but you were the perfect target. A recent widower, vulnerable, wealthy, and with good business connections. Robert closed his eyes, feeling a mixture of anger and humiliation. How could he have been so naive? And why are you telling me this now? Because I saw your daughter once. Beatrice brought her to the office where we worked. The way she treated that child when she thought no one was looking. It was horrible. I quit soon after. I couldn't work for someone like that. And when I saw you were getting a divorce, I thought you deserved to know the truth. Do you have proof of this? Emails, messages, anything? I have some emails I saved before I left. I can send them to you. And there's one more thing. The man she was on the phone with last night, I recognized his voice. How do you know about that? Because I was temporarily working at Beatrice's house 2 weeks ago, helping organize some files. I saw her talking to this man. It's Roger Lewis, a lawyer who isn't exactly known for his ethics. He specializes in complicated divorces and in getting favorable settlements through questionable methods. Robert wrote down the name. Thank you very much, Patricia. Can you send those emails to my lawyer's address? I'll give you the contact details. After hanging up, Robert sat in silence for long minutes. Every conversation he had had with Beatrice, every moment that had seemed too perfect to be true, everything now made sense in a completely new light. He hadn't fallen in love with a real woman. He had fallen in love with a character carefully constructed to manipulate him. That afternoon, Robert decided to do something he should have done a long time ago. He went to Helena's room and sat beside her while she did her homework. My flower, I need to tell you something important. Helena looked at her father, her expression worried. Is it about her? In part, yes. I found out today that Beatrice was never who she said she was. She planned our relationship from the beginning. Everything was an elaborate lie. Helena was silent for a moment, processing the information. I knew she was mean, but I didn't know she was that mean. No one should have to find out these things about people, especially not a child. But I want you to know that the mistake was mine. I should have been more careful. I should have investigated better. I should have listened to you from the beginning. You couldn't have known, Daddy. She's very good at deceiving people. But I'm your father. I should have realized you were suffering. Helena hugged her father. You're here now. That's what matters. Later that night, when Helena was already asleep, Robert heard noises coming from downstairs. Silently, he went down the stairs and saw a light on in the office. The door was ajar and he could see Beatrice rummaging through his files. Looking for something specific? He asked from the doorway, making Beatrice jump in fright. She quickly composed her expression. Just looking for some documents that are mine. Everything in this office belongs to this house and this family. You have no right to touch anything here. Beatrice turned to him, and for the first time Robert saw the true person behind the mask. There were no more attempts to be pleasant or to justify herself. Just cold, calculating anger. Do you really think you're going to get rid of me so easily? I'm your wife. I have rights. You are a fraud, and I have proof of that now. Beatrice narrowed her eyes. Proof? What kind of proof? Robert smiled, but it was not a happy smile. Let's just say an old assistant of yours was very helpful. I know about the planning, about the investigation you did into me before we met, about how everything was orchestrated. For a moment, Beatrice seemed genuinely concerned, but quickly regained her composure. That proves nothing. Many people research someone before a relationship. It's not a crime. No, but marital fraud can be considered in a divorce, especially when combined with the treatment you gave my daughter. Beatrice took a step towards Robert. You have no idea what you're doing. I have friends, contacts. I can make your life hell if I want to. You can try, but I also have resources. And unlike you, I have the truth on my side. At that moment, a voice came from the stairs. Daddy? It was Helena, who had woken up to the sound of the raised voices. Robert quickly went to her. It's all right, my flower. Go back to bed. But Beatrice couldn't resist one last cruelty. See, Helena? Even now you're still causing trouble. If you weren't so spoiled, none of this would be happening. Robert turned to Beatrice with a fury he rarely displayed. Get out of this office now, and if you speak one more word to my daughter, I will make you leave this house today, laws or not. Beatrice left, but before disappearing down the hallway, she looked back with a disturbing smile. You haven't won yet. This is far from over. Robert took Helena back to her room and stayed with her until she fell asleep again. He knew Beatrice wasn't bluffing. She had something planned, some final blow, and he needed to find out what it was before it was too late. The next day, Robert received the emails Patricia had promised. They were exactly as she had described. Detailed conversations about how to investigate Robert, how to approach him, what personality to build to attract him. There was even an email where Beatrice discussed with Patricia how to deal with Helena, referring to the girl as an inconvenient obstacle that would need to be managed. Robert forwarded everything to his lawyer and also hired a private investigator to find out more about Roger Lewis, the lawyer Beatrice was consulting. What he discovered was troubling. Lewis had a history of cases where he had helped clients fabricate evidence, distort facts, and turn victims into villains. And then, 3 days later, Robert discovered Beatrice's plan. She was preparing an accusation that Robert was a negligent and emotionally abusive father. She had falsified documents, witnesses she had paid to lie, even a supposed psychological report that painted Robert as unstable. The objective was obvious. If she could make Robert appear to be an unfit father, she could argue that she deserved greater compensation in the divorce for having endured a difficult marriage. She could even challenge Helena's custody, not because she wanted the girl, but because it would give her more bargaining power. Robert sat in his office, looking at all those fake documents, feeling a mixture of disbelief and anger. Beatrice was willing to destroy not only him, but also Helena, just to get what she wanted. But Robert Miller had not built an empire by being passive. It was time to show Beatrice that she had chosen the wrong adversary. He picked up the phone and called his lawyer. We need to get ahead of this. I want you to file for a restraining order against Beatrice, and I want all these false documents exposed before she can use them. The war was far from over. But now Robert had the weapons and the determination necessary to win. The hearing was scheduled for a Monday morning at the Manhattan Supreme Court. Robert had woken up early, put on his best suit, and mentally prepared for what was to come. Helena would stay with Maria during the hearing, in a safe environment away from all the drama that would unfold in court. Before leaving, Robert went to Helena's room. The girl was sitting on the bed, hugging a teddy bear that had belonged to her mother. Will everything be all right, Daddy? Yes, my flower. Today is the day the truth finally comes out. What if the judge doesn't believe you? Robert sat beside his daughter, holding her small hands. I have faith in justice, and I have all the proof we need. But the most important thing is that we have the truth on our side. In court, Robert met his lawyer, Dr. Frederick Carter, a 50-year-old man with graying hair and an impeccable reputation in the legal world. Beside him was Patricia Smith, Beatrice's former assistant who had agreed to testify. Across the room, Beatrice was impeccable in a conservative grey dress next to Roger Lewis, her lawyer. She looked at Robert with an expression that mixed defiance and confidence. Clearly, she still believed she could win. The judge entered, a middle-aged man with a serious expression and attentive eyes. Everyone stood until he sat down and began the hearing. We are here today to address the petition for divorce between Robert Miller and Beatrice Miller, the judge began. I understand there are also matters related to the custody of the minor Helena Miller and the division of assets. Dr. Lewis, you may begin. Roger Lewis stood up, adjusting his tie. Your Honor, my client was a victim in a marriage where she was constantly belittled and isolated. Mr. Robert Miller is a workaholic who was never present for his family. My client sacrificed her own career to care for her stepdaughter, only to now be unjustly discarded. Robert clenched his fists under the table, but maintained a calm expression. Dr. Carter rose to counter-argue. Your Honor, what my colleague describes is a carefully constructed fiction. The truth is that Mrs. Beatrice Miller planned her relationship with my client from the beginning, with purely financial motivations. Furthermore, she subjected the minor Helena to cruel and humiliating treatment throughout the marriage. Dr. Lewis smiled. These are serious accusations with no factual basis. The child simply never accepted my client as a maternal figure and created stories to separate them. It was then that Dr. Carter presented his first piece of evidence. Your Honor, I would like to call witness Patricia Smith to the stand. Patricia nervously stood up and went to the witness stand. After swearing to tell the truth, she began to tell her story. She described in detail how Beatrice had planned every aspect of her relationship with Robert, how she had investigated his life, how she had constructed a false persona specifically to attract him. This proves nothing, Dr. Lewis objected. Researching someone before a relationship is not illegal. But marital fraud can be considered when there is premeditation for financial gain, Dr. Carter retorted. And we have emails that prove exactly that. The emails were presented and read aloud. As the words were spoken, the confidence on Beatrice's face began to falter. Robert could see panic beginning to set in her eyes. But the most dramatic twist came when Dr. Carter called his next witness. Your Honor, I would like to call Mrs. Marcia Miller, the respondent's sister, to the stand. Beatrice turned sharply to her lawyer, whispering something furiously. Roger Lewis looked equally surprised. Marcia entered the courtroom with dignity, dressed in simple but elegant clothes. Robert had secretly sought her out after that visit to the mansion and asked her to testify. He had also ensured that their mother's treatment was paid in full. Mrs. Marcia, can you tell us about your sister Beatrice's relationship with the truth? Marcia looked at Beatrice with a mixture of sadness and determination. My sister has a history of lies and manipulation. From a young age, she always distorted the truth to benefit herself. There was a particularly serious incident where she destroyed our younger sister's relationship with deliberate lies, simply out of envy. She continued to tell story after story, each painting a clear picture of who Beatrice truly was. The judge listened attentively, taking notes. Then Dr. Carter presented the most devastating evidence of all. He called Maria to the stand. The cook, who had worked in the house for over 10 years, was visibly nervous but determined to tell the truth. Maria, can you describe the treatment the minor Helena received from the respondent? With a choked voice, Maria told everything. The plates of spoiled food, the constant humiliations, the nights Helena cried herself to sleep, the times she herself had to hide food for the girl, because Beatrice was depriving her of adequate meals. Did you personally witness any of these events? Many, sir, including the day Mr. Robert unexpectedly returned from his trip and found Mrs. Beatrice trying to force the girl to eat leftovers from the trash. There was a murmur in the courtroom. The judge raised his hand for silence. Dr. Lewis tried to counter, but it was difficult to question the emotional testimony of a maid who clearly had nothing to gain from lying. The hearing continued for hours. More witnesses were called. More evidence was presented. Dr. Lewis tried to present his fake documents, but Dr. Carter systematically challenged them, proving they were fraudulent. The biggest twist came when Dr. Carter revealed that he had hired a private investigator who discovered that Roger Lewis had attempted to bribe witnesses to lie in favor of Beatrice. He presented audio recordings and bank documents that proved suspicious transfers. The judge looked at Roger Lewis sternly. Dr. Lewis, these are extremely serious accusations. Do you wish to comment? Roger Lewis was visibly shaken. Your Honor, I had no knowledge of these actions. If members of my office acted improperly, it was without my approval. The judge did not seem convinced. I will request an additional investigation into this. For now, let's continue with this hearing. When it was finally time for Beatrice to testify, she took the stand with her confidence visibly shaken. Dr. Carter questioned her relentlessly, catching every contradiction, every lie, every attempt at manipulation. Mrs. Miller, you said you abandoned your career to dedicate yourself to the family. Can you tell us exactly what your professional position was before the marriage? I was a manager at a marketing company. And the name of that company? Beatrice hesitated. It was a small company. It's already closed down. Interesting, because we haven't found any record of you working at any marketing company in the last 10 years. In fact, we haven't found any record of you working anywhere. Beatrice began to sweat. I worked informally, so you didn't abandon any career, did you? With each question, Beatrice became more entangled in her own lies. Robert watched with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction because the truth was finally being exposed. Sadness because he had believed that woman, had trusted her with what was most precious to him, his daughter. After hours of testimony, the judge finally announced that he would deliver his decision in 2 weeks, after carefully reviewing all the evidence presented. But from the tone of his voice and the way he looked at Beatrice, Robert knew that victory was near. When he left the courtroom, Robert breathed the fresh New York City air with profound relief. Dr. Carter placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did very well today. The evidence is overwhelmingly in our favor. Thank you, Frederick, for everything." Robert went straight home, eager to hug Helena and tell her that everything was heading for a just end. When he walked through the door, he found the girl in the living room with Maria, playing with puzzles. "Daddy!" Helena ran into her father's arms. "Hi, my flower. How was your day?" "Good. Maria made my favorite cake." "And you, how was court?" "It went very well. The truth is finally coming out, and soon all of this will be over." Helena hugged her father tightly. "So she's really leaving?" "Yes, she is. And she'll never be able to hurt us again." That night, father and daughter had dinner together, just the two of them, a simple meal but full of meaning. For the first time in a long time, there was peace in that house. It wasn't a complete peace yet. Beatrice was still technically living there, but it was a glimpse of what was to come. Later, when Helena was already asleep, Robert went up to the attic. He had avoided that place since Mariana left. It was too painful. But now he felt it was time to face those memories. Among dusty boxes, he found what he was looking for: Mariana's diary, filled with her notes, thoughts, and reflections. Robert sat on the dusty attic floor and began to read. Tears streamed down his face as Mariana's voice came back to him through those pages. One passage in particular touched his heart deeply. She had written a few months before she passed, "Robert is a good man, but sometimes he gets lost in his work. My biggest fear is that if something happens to me, he will be so lost that he will no longer see what truly matters. Helena needs him present, not just a provider. I hope he understands this before it's too late." Robert closed the diary and held it against his chest. "I'm sorry, Mariana. It took me a long time, but I finally understood. I'm finally truly here for our daughter." The next 2 weeks were the most tense, and at the same time the most transformative in Robert and Helena's lives. Beatrice had temporarily moved to a hotel, awaiting the judge's decision. The house finally breathed without that toxic presence, and father and daughter began the long process of healing. Robert had completely restructured his business. He hired a CEO to manage daily operations, keeping only the most important strategic decisions for himself. This gave him time to be the father Helena had always needed. He picked her up and dropped her off at school every day, helped with homework, attended parent-teacher meetings. He was a transformed man. Helena, in turn, had blossomed. The pale, frightened girl of months ago had given way to a vibrant and happy child. Her brown eyes shone again, she laughed frequently and had made new friends at school. Juliana Anderson, her teacher, had commented to Robert about the noticeable change in the girl, how she now actively participated in classes and showed a confidence that hadn't existed before. One Saturday morning, Robert woke up to the sound of laughter coming from the garden. He looked out the window and saw Helena playing with a dog, a golden retriever they had adopted a few weeks ago. She had asked for a dog for months, and Robert finally agreed. The name Helena chose was Hope, a name that carried all the meaning of the journey they had been through. Robert went downstairs and joined her in the garden. The morning sun was warm but not uncomfortable, and there was a gentle breeze that made the flowers dance. "Daddy, look what Hope learned!" Helena gestured, and the dog sat obediently. "She learned in just 2 weeks. She's very smart. Like you," Robert said, affectionately ruffling his daughter's hair. They spent the morning together in the garden, playing with Hope, tending to the flowers, simply enjoying each other's company. They were simple moments, but it was in these simple moments that true happiness resided. Later, Robert had a surprise for Helena. "Daddy needs to show you something. Come with me." He led her to the attic, that place he used to visit alone in recent weeks. But today was different. Today he was ready to share. "Remember your mother's diary? Yes, you let me read it sometimes. Well, I found more of her things up here. Letters, photos, even some old videos. I think it's time we looked at them together, not with sadness but with gratitude for having had her in our lives." Helena hugged her father. I'd love that. They spent hours in the attic, laughing at old photos, reading letters full of love and hope, watching videos from when Helena was a baby. Mariana was there in every image, her smile lighting up the old recordings, her voice echoing through the years. One letter in particular deeply touched them both. It was a letter Mariana had written to Helena, to be read when she was older. Robert found it in a sealed envelope with clear instructions. For Helena, when she needs to hear my voice. "Do you want me to read it to you?" Robert offered. Helena nodded, her hands holding the letter with reverent care. Robert began to read. "My dearest Helena, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer physically here, but know that I will always be with you. In every beat of your heart, in every moment of courage, in every decision you make. I want you to know some important things. First, you are stronger than you imagine. Life will present you with challenges. It will test you in ways we cannot predict. But you have within you a strength that comes from generations of strong women. Use that strength. Second, your father loves you more than anything in the world. He may sometimes get lost in his work. He may forget to show his feelings, but deep in his heart, you are everything. Be patient with him, as I know he will be with you. And third, never let anyone make you feel less than you are. You are loved, you are valuable, you are important. Anyone who makes you feel otherwise does not deserve a place in your life. Be kind, but also be strong. Be compassionate, but do not allow your kindness to be abused. And above all, be yourself. I love you, my Helena. Always and forever, Mom." When Robert finished reading, both were crying. But they were tears of love, of gratitude, of connection with someone who, though no longer physically present, had never truly left. "She knew," Helena whispered. "Somehow she knew I would need to hear that. Your mother was wise, and she would be so proud of the person you are becoming." That afternoon they organized all of Mariana's memories into a special chest which would stay in Helena's room. It was no longer about hiding the pain, but about honoring the memory and moving forward with love. On Sunday, Robert had another surprise. He had organized a small barbecue in the garden, inviting the people who had been important throughout that journey. Maria was there with her family, Carla too, even Patricia Smith, Beatrice's former assistant, who had been crucial in revealing the truth. Juliana Anderson, the teacher, was also invited, along with some of Helena's new friends from school. It was a celebration of life, of truth, of family, that was not just of blood, but of choice and loyalty. During the barbecue, Robert gathered everyone and made a toast. "I want to thank all of you. Each of you, in some way, helped Helena and me get out of a very dark moment in our lives. You had the courage to tell the truth when it was easier to stay silent. You supported us when we needed it. And for that, you will always be part of our family." There was applause and hugs, and Helena was radiant, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about her. It was a scene so different from that cold, silent house that existed when Beatrice was present. Later, when the guests had left and Helena was helping to clean up, she asked, "Daddy, do you think you'll ever get married again?" Robert paused and thought carefully before answering. "Maybe someday, but I won't be looking for it. If it happens, it will happen naturally. And you can be sure of one thing. I will never bring someone into our lives without being absolutely certain that they are the right person. And you will have a voice in that decision always. Thank you, Daddy, for finally listening to me. I'm sorry it took me so long." That night, before going to sleep, Helena was in her room writing in a new diary Robert had given her. He knocked lightly on the door. "May I come in?" "Of course, Daddy." Robert sat on the edge of the bed. "I was thinking you're growing up so fast. Soon you'll be a teenager, then a woman. And I want to be present for every moment. I won't miss anything else." "You won't miss anything, Daddy, I promise. And I promise you that this house will always be a safe place, where you can be yourself, where you can make mistakes and learn, where you can grow without fear. No one will ever again make you feel small or insignificant." Helena hugged her father. "I know, and you know what? I think everything that happened, as difficult as it was, made us stronger, made us a real family." Robert kissed his daughter's forehead. "You are as wise as your mother." The following week, Robert received an unexpected call. It was Marcia, Beatrice's sister. "Mr. Miller, I just wanted to let you know that Beatrice has left New York City. She got a job in another city and is going to therapy." I don't know if it will change who she is, but at least she's trying. I hope she finds peace, Robert said sincerely, and that she learns from her mistakes. I also wanted to thank you for continuing to pay for our mother's treatment. She's getting better. It's the right thing to do. Your mother is not to blame for the choices Beatrice made. Months continued to pass, each bringing new joys and small challenges. Helena had her 10th birthday party, a big celebration with all her friends, very different from the lonely parties of previous years. Robert was there, not just physically but truly present, participating in games, cutting the cake, taking photos that Helena would one day show her own children. Robert's company also prospered under the new structure. He discovered that by delegating more and focusing on what truly mattered, the business actually improved. His executives were competent and dedicated, and he could trust them to manage daily operations. On a rainy winter afternoon, father and daughter were in the library, each reading their own books but together in the same space. It was in these moments of shared silence that Robert felt the deepest peace. They didn't need to be constantly talking or doing something. Each other's presence was enough. Helena looked up from her book and smiled at her father. He smiled back, and in that smile was everything they needed to say. Love, trust, security, family. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the city, renewing everything. And inside that house, which had once been the scene of so much suffering, peace now reigned. A peace achieved through truth, the courage to face past mistakes, and the commitment to create a better future. Helena returned her attention to her book, but before she did, she closed her eyes for a moment and whispered softly, so softly that only she could hear, "Thank you, Mom, for your strength, for your wisdom, for teaching me that I can be strong even when everything seems lost." And at that moment, if anyone had been paying very close attention, they could have sworn that a gentle breeze passed through the library, carrying the scent of jasmine, making the pages of the books rustle softly. Mariana was there not in body but in spirit, watching her daughter and her husband finally find their way back to each other. Life would never be perfect. There would still be challenges, there would still be difficult moments. But Robert and Helena now knew that together they could face anything. They had learned the most important lessons, the ones that only adversity can teach. They had discovered that family is not just about being physically present, but about truly seeing and hearing each other, about protecting, about trusting, about loving unconditionally. And as the rain continued inside that house in New York City, a new story was being written. A story of new beginnings, of second chances, of love that overcomes even the darkest moments. A story that proved that even when all seems lost, there is always hope. There is always light at the end of the tunnel. And it is always, always worth fighting for those we love.